Hello, everybody, and good evening, and welcome to a roundtable today on travel emergencies. And what we're going to be talking about today is that things happen when you're traveling. And I know as a tour guide, things have happened to my tour guides, things have happened to my guests, and things have happened to me personally. And I think it's very interesting to share what we've learned. And I did a poll a few days ago, and I just said, hey, if anybody has an interesting story to tell, email it in. And we got so many submissions. We couldn't believe how many people out there. How many of you out there have had massive travel emergencies? We had to break it into 2 blogs. We had so many stories. So if you're interested in reading those stories, you can go to adventureswithsarah.net and you can read some people's stories. But we picked 2 that we thought were really interesting that might help you to learn something, particularly because of the travel insurance piece. One of our guests tonight did have travel insurance. One of them did not. So we're going to kind of see how that played out. And we're going to kind of get a little bit of an idea of what maybe we can do better going forward. Were there any lessons to be learned? Or, you know, it's just bad luck, bad luck. So I'd like you to please welcome Kim Bodnar. We have my friend Kim who has traveled with me before, and she is now in Maui, Hawaii. So hello, Kim. Aloha.
Aloha.
And we have Kristen Stewart coming to us you're from the East Coast. You're on the East Coast, right?
From Orlando, Florida. Yeah, I'm in Orlando.
Yeah, so Kristen's coming to us from Orlando. So we're going to get, we've found the right time for this because I'm right in the middle. I'm in Pacific time. So, thank you guys for joining me. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Kristen. So Kristen, tell me a little about your travel emergency.
Yeah, so my husband and I, we're not older, but we're not exactly young. We're kind of in that middle age bracket. And we started buying travel insurance probably when my daughter had her senior trip. We had traveled a lot prior. I kind of risked it, didn't really think we needed it. I had credit cards that had insurance on it, just kind of thought it'd be fine. We were planning a 3-week trip that I let her plan. And that's when we started buying travel insurance because I'm like, gee whiz, this is getting expensive. And if something happened her senior year and we couldn't go, we'd be out a lot of money. So I really wasn't looking at it from the medical standpoint. I was looking at it from a cancellation standpoint. And from then on, I just started buying travel insurance. Just for a little bit of background, I've worked in the travel industry for over 20 years. So I've sold travel insurance to other people, but never bought it myself. And so I started purchasing it for our family. I never had to use it, never had to file a claim until this past summer. So my husband and I, we were in Amalfi. We were staying in Maori. And my husband started saying, you know, my groin kind of hurts. I don't really feel great. I'm having a hard time walking. And he kind of pushed through because I'm like, we're on the Amalfi Coast and you need to toughen up, bud, you know? And so we did our sightseeing. We took a lot of ferries. I didn't make him do the lemon trail hike I wanted to do. I kind of gave him a pass on certain things. We went to Naples for 4 nights. We went to Pompeii and did all those sites. Poor guy. He's pushing through like a champ with pain meds. Come to find out on our last day in Naples, there were some things I wanted to do. And he had definitely developed a hernia.
That's what I guess. Tour guide spidey senses. I was like, that's a hernia. Okay.
Yeah, it was a hernia. And we were supposed to be flying to Switzerland next. We were supposed to be spending 10 days in Switzerland hiking. And it became very apparent that we were not going to Switzerland to go hiking. And so I called the insurance company and said, hey, I've never had to do this before. What do we do? We're going to have to cancel a bunch of non-refundable stuff, thousands of dollars, you know? So how does all this work? And the first thing they said is we had to go to a hospital and we had to get him a fit to fly because they wouldn't move forward with anything unless he had permission to fly home.
Okay.
So we had to find a hospital in Naples that was open on their Independence Day holiday in June. That was fun. So we did find one. We had a taxi driver who chain smoked his way all the way to the hospital for us, but he took good care of us. That was unique. I couldn't go in with him. We had armed guards at the entrance and he had to go in by himself. I could not go with my husband to the hospital.
That
was
weird.
The first.
Did they tell you why?
Yeah. No. Well, in my limited Italian, no. I tried, but it was like, no. And he had a gun, so I wasn't going to question that. But yeah, that was unique. Mike said, though, that they were all very, very nice. And he was in and out of there in 30 minutes.
Wow.
No bill with his fit to fly.
So
No
all they
bill.
did was just examine him and say, yep, you have a hernia.
Yep. You have a hernia and you can fly home. And they gave him the piece of paper. There was no bill. There was nothing we had to pay, nothing. He walked out with this piece of paper and said, we can leave now. So
And with the hernia, it's not like you're going to die any second. So you knew.
no, but that's what I was telling your assistant. This isn't like an emergency per se. It's just like, we can't continue our vacation. So what do I do at this point? Right.
Were you already with the hospital at home to find out what they thought?
No.
No.
At this point, no. He emailed his doctor. So he did email, but you got to remember, this is morning in Italy. So nobody was going to be at an office for another many hours. So we're kind of, going at it on our own here. And obviously they want to examine him here, right? So they're not going to make a call until we get home, basically. So at this point, we talked to the insurance company. They were great, I will say. They did call me that afternoon to check in on us. At that point, I had probably done a boo-boo. I had started changing our flights myself. Because I've worked in travel for a long time, I felt like, hey, I can do this. So I start making calls and switching around all of our flights and doing all of this. And then when the insurance company called, they're like, well, our doctor has seen the paperwork that you guys sent from Italy, and we don't want you flying premium economy home. We want you in business class home. And I'm like, super. We were originally supposed to be flying business class home, but I couldn't afford the change to fly business class home. So we were like, premium economy will do, and he can tough it out. It'll be fine. And they were like, no, we're going to pay for it because you have over $50,000 in emergency back that we can use.
Wow.
And I was like, great.
So would they have then booked it for you then? Had you let them?
So what I should not have done is wasted hours of my life on the phone. So that's the first thing I'd like to share. If you ever have a situation where you're in an emergency and you have travel insurance and you call them, their travel planning people, just let them do it. I don't care how much experience you have, as long as they're not going to route you through any place crazy. The people I did speak to, they were in the States. They were extremely helpful. They were working on it, calling Virgin Atlantic for me, changing our flights, routing us through London, getting us upgraded flights, getting us seats together. Like, I don't know who they had to move because I had to take care of him. I'm like, it's a hernia, he'll be fine. But that's not how they felt. So it was very like hand-holding-ish, which I'm not used to. I'm just not, because as an independent traveler, you just do it all on your own, right? So it was very like hand-holdy. They had wheelchairs set up for me everywhere. Like, we got to Heathrow Airport and they're like, here's your wheelchair. They had everything all set up. And then as far as,
did he walk at that point?
Not very well. He was very slow. We had to spend the night in London just because of how flights are into Orlando. I wanted the most direct route home. And I told them I was fine with an overnight because that's typically what we have to do anyway when we reroute, is spend the night near Heathrow. I made him take me out for a tea that afternoon because, I was leaving my European vacation early. He leant into the Wolseley to take me for my tea.
It's my favorite.
I love the Wolseley tea. You can't beat it, right?
The best in London.
Yeah, it is. It's the best. I love the Wolseley tea. And so I said, well, you're taking me for tea if we're going home early. So we did the Wolseley tea. And then we ended up home. He ended up in the emergency room the next day. The doctors wanted him to go the day we landed, but by the time we got home, it was like 7 o'clock at night. And he was like, I'm not doing it. We'll go in the morning. So at 6 o'clock the next morning, we were in the ER. He got admitted to the hospital and he had surgery. So that was within 24 hours of us coming home.
So it was an emergency. I mean, hernias are weird that way, aren't they? Because I remember my ex-husband, he had a hernia, and it was kind of one of those things that it just got worse and worse and worse until it was like, yeah, you should do something about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was to the point they were worried about like a strangulation. I mean, they were talking all sorts of crazy stuff. So he ended up having the surgery very quickly after we got home. And they even had him spend the night at the hospital. Like, I just assumed we'd be coming home, but no, there was none of that. They kept him. They did the surgery. And yeah, now he's pretty much fine. So but
at any point, did they even suggest that you stay in Italy for the surgery, or is that an option?
I think if it was something where like you had a heart attack or you broke a limb, I mean, obviously you wouldn't be able to travel, right? But for something like this, they said he was fit to fly as long as we went home and that he saw a doctor right away. That was the biggest thing.
So the travel insurance gave you that advice then, right?
So did the doctor in Italy.
Okay. But the travel insurance was the one who said, go get examined for a fit to fly.
Correct.
Interesting.
Fit to fly. As long as we got a fit to fly, then we could fly. If not, then he probably would have had to have surgery in Italy. If the Italian doctor didn't think he was fit to fly, he probably would have been having surgery there.
And
so
which
yeah.
insurance agency did you go through?
We did Alliance, and
yeah.
I typically I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Am I allowed? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a couple.
You're allowed to say anything.
There's a couple. There's a couple companies I normally use. I normally use TravelX or Alliance. Those are the two. They did pretty well during COVID. They took care of most of their clients, whereas a few of the other big names out there did not. And so I tend to go with them.
Yeah, I've worked with Travel Guard before, and I didn't care for them personally. Allianz is the one that we are going to start recommending for our guests. Yeah. So if you're booking a tour with us, that's going to show up on your paperwork that we're going to suggest.
Yeah, I like Allianz. Yeah, I really, really like Allianz. They were really, really great. And then afterwards, the claim piece. I don't know. Do you care about hearing about how the claim all went down?
Okay. Yeah.
After the claim went down, so we had some non-refundable things in Switzerland because obviously we canceled very last minute. Like, had I canceled 3 days prior, I may have been able to get some money back or whatever. But there were a lot of things I couldn't cancel, and so we were out rail passes, and those are expensive in Switzerland. And we were out hotel stay and vegan, which you can imagine how much that cost. So we had to submit the receipts for all of those, obviously in all different currencies, and it was all going to be based on not what we spent, even though I sent credit card receipts. It was on whatever the exchange rate was on the day. So that was a little wonky, a little bit, but I guess that's how it. So, but we did end up getting the majority of our money back. I think I was out maybe $100 at the end of it, which I thought was pretty good. I got a check. It took 3 weeks maybe, which I didn't think was bad. And then I had a check in the mail.
How long did it take for you to assemble all of that information? Like, how long from the incident to the time you got the check?
I would say a week. They wanted it within a month, but I got it done because I wanted the money. I mean, I just did. I kind of wanted the money back. We went and booked another vacation the day he was in the hospital getting surgery, because that's just how we are. Because we came back early. It was his 50th birthday trip, so he wanted to go do something else.
So the rebooking of the flight, though, you didn't outlay any money for that. They did that.
No. Mm-mm.
So you didn't need to be reimbursed. They just paid for that.
No. And as a matter of fact, when I called to talk to them about the flights that I had originally booked, Virgin Atlantic refunded everything because we were in a class of service that I could. So they refunded my points, which I used points to purchase my tickets, and the taxes. They refunded all of it. So we weren't out anything as far as the airlines went. And then the insurance paid for new tickets.
So I'm hearing that probably the best, sort of takeaway from this for those of you watching is travel insurance is a good idea. And also keep track of all the expenses. Like, that's good for you budgeting anyway. I mean, I'm not good about this, and I should be, of writing down what you intend to spend, what you're spending money on. And then if anything happens, you've already got a spreadsheet or something. Like, if you're a real budget person. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they wanted is your entire itinerary. So I had to send them our first flight, even though it had nothing to do with anything. Oh. They had to see my entire trip. They wanted every hotel we were going to stay at, even if I'd already stayed there. They wanted to see my flights there, my flights home. They wanted to see the entire trip because that's what I had insured, right? So they wanted to see the dates that I actually traveled. They wanted to know that I actually traveled those dates that I had insured. And they wanted to see every single thing that I had booked. So that way they understood what they were getting compensation for. And then they wanted to see receipts. And a lot of that, I just sent credit card statements, and I would go in and highlight the bits that they needed.
Well, that's sent them over. Point is when you're making big purchases for your travel, put it on a good credit card that has an easy Like I love my Delta Amex because when I need any of the statements, I can even sort by category and it'll cherry pick the
Correct.
thing. That's a really,
Yeah.
really put
And that's exactly what I did, Sarah. I hit travel and it just and I could just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I just spent like 3 days doing my taxes this week where I had to go through every line of credit cards. And I'm like, I love Amex very much right now because it was the only one that was easy to pick off all of the travel related expenses. So yeah.
That's
Cool.
That's
well,
so definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad he's feeling better, and he had a memorable 50th birthday trip. So I mean,
yeah,
you'll never forget that.
No, it's a little disappointing, but that's okay. It'll be all right. He got to do his other little trip that we just got back a couple days ago. So we did that, and there's always next year, right?
Yeah, that's true. And that's another be careful what you wish for thing. Never put out into the universe that you want a memorable trip. Don't ever say that. Because like sometimes honestly, like in these insane days in our like world history, I would like an unmemorable trip. I would like an unmemorable day, right?
Something that just easy.
Yeah, so I'm wishing for unmemorable days. So that's a wonderful story. Thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing that. So I'd like to call Kim up as the counterpoint. Kim is our because unfortunately, my friend Kim did not have travel insurance. So you have a story to tell too about not Machu Picchu, but of Peru, right? Lake Titicaca.
Yeah, Lake Titicaca. Yeah. So my family and I, there were actually 6 of us, my husband and I and his 2 brothers and my sisters-in-law. So there were 6 of us. And we traveled with a tour guide. It was just the 6 of us and a tour guide to Peru. The plan was to be there for about 3 weeks, and we were probably close to 17, 18 days into our trip, and had just finished Machu Picchu. So we were fairly high elevation at Machu Picchu, but then we went up to 12,000 feet to Lake Titicaca. And the plan was to go out on this boat, and we had to be out for 2 hours to get out into the middle of Lake Titicaca to a small island where we were going to hike up to the top of the island and then hike back down to a different point to reach the boat. And the idea was to be on the island about 3 or 4 hours. And I had not purchased insurance for this trip. I don't know why I didn't. I just didn't think about it. I think I hadn't done a lot of international travel. I was kind of new to international travel and I didn't think about it. So we were on this hike, and it's a very remote place. And I remember on the boat on our way out, they told us, first of all, that they had oxygen tank on the boat. And also that when we were on the island, we had to be off the island within a certain, at like 2 p.m. You have to be at the dock at 2 p.m. And if not, we're leaving you. And so I was like, okay, we got to be off this island by 2 p.m. and I'm going to follow all the rules and listen to all the instructions. And so we had this lovely day. We did this long hike. We're coming down and we're about a mile to the place where we need to meet the boat. And I see this beautiful arch, and there's glorious water in the background. And I hand my phone to my husband and I say, "Oh, Paul, will you take a photo of me?" And I turn my back to the arch so that the arch and the water would be in the background. And then I'm looking and up behind my husband come these people that are hiking down, and I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to be in their way. I don't want to stop them from continuing. So I decided to step off the trail to the right. And so far, the whole trail had been flat, and there had been no drop-offs anywhere. But unknown to me, there was a 4-foot drop-off, and I fell without even knowing I was going to fall. So I did not break my fall, and I smacked my ribs on the right side. And having been a person who rode horses as a kid growing up, and I've been thrown from horses, I couldn't breathe, and I knew my diaphragm had been just completely knocked out, and I was having to work hard to breathe. And then I'm a nurse, and I thought, well, I better check, and I can wiggle my toes, I can feel my lower half, I can feel everything, but I think I've probably broken my ribs. And most assuredly, I'm probably punctured my lung. And we're at 12,000 feet. And my other thought was, I wonder if I've punctured my liver, because I'd landed on my right side. And I work in the surgery area. So I thought, well, that's a surgical emergency and I won't live through that because I'm too far from healthcare. So if I've punctured my liver, this is it. But if I've just punctured my lung, if I can get out of here, I might live, but I might not. So I got pulled out of this trench. It was an excruciating pain and I could not breathe. And I remember, because I had listened to the instructions on the boat, that there was an oxygen tank, like a big oxygen tank, not just a little one. And so I remember working really hard and I was able to like finally just say oxygen, but it took me a while to say the word because I couldn't get anything moving through my diaphragm. And there, fortunately, my tour guide had sent someone he was training who was 21 and he was Peruvian and he was a soccer player and he could run the mile down to the boat and then run one of those huge oxygen tanks back up to us. And I was able to get that oxygen mask on me. And then I was thinking to myself, I've got to keep myself oxygenated for at least 2 hours because mainland is a long way away. And so I would give them a number 2 or a number 10 or a number 2 to keep the flow of the oxygen up or down so I could keep that oxygen to last as long as possible. Well, I did make it onto the boat. And when I made it to mainland, we were able to get me to a small, tiny clinic in the middle of nowhere. It's a tiny place. Sarah, maybe you've been to Puno. It's a very tiny community, and they have old equipment. But they got me a little chest X-ray, and they said, yes, your lung is dropping on the right side, but they didn't see any issues with my liver at that point. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm losing blood, so I think I'm okay. But they told me I had to get to Lima, which was a flight away. And I was said, well, I know you shouldn't fly when your lung is dropping because that's contraindicated. And my brother-in-law, who's an engineer and also for fun flies airplanes, he said, well, why can't you fly when your lung is dropping? And I said, well, high altitude is really bad for lungs. And when I go up in a plane, it would be dangerous. And he said, well, you're at 12,000 feet. And we're only going to be at 8,000 if we get in a plane because of the pressure. And so I was like, okay, I'll get on the plane. And so we got myself on a plane. We didn't, we had to tell them that I was just, we told the airline that I just had hypoxia or that I was suffering from altitude sickness. And so they let me on, even though I looked quite sick. My tour guide was like, I'm not going to tell them that you've fallen and broken things. We're just going to get on that plane. So we did. And as soon as we landed in Lima, he had already arranged for me to go to a private hospital that only embassy and wealthy people in Lima go to. And like you, Kirsten, it was completely surrounded with guards and machine guns. My husband was able to come into the hospital, but once I was in, I was not allowed to leave because it was completely surrounded with men and machine guns. So I had a chest CAT scan, and it did confirm again that my lung was dropping rather quickly, and I was going to need surgery. But here's an interesting thing I learned is if you don't have insurance and you go to a private hospital, at least in Peru, probably other places too, hand over your credit card. And they put a $10,000 hold on my credit card. So I was like,
10,000?
10,000 is what they wanted. Only 10. Yeah, I know. And Paul kept saying, I hope we can get you out of here. I hope I can afford to pay for you to get out of here when you leave, because I was there for 3 days and they had to install a chest tube into my right lung and in an operating room. But it was, they took care of me beautifully. The nurses found out I was a nurse and they were very excited to give me gifts and talk to me and help me along. And the doctor, I didn't speak Spanish, but my guide did help me a lot. And also I said to Sarah, Google Translate was my friend. I just used Google Translate and we would talk back and forth. And I got lucky because a friend of mine and a doctor I work with that in Seattle where I live, That's her job. She's a surgeon, and she puts in these chest tubes as well. And I texted her and I just said, "Hey, I fell. I'm in the hospital. I have a chest tube, and I'm trying to get home, and I'd like to fly home, but I'm not sure it's safe." And she said, as long as these things, and we had a long list of things that we needed to follow to allow me to fly home commercial. She did let me fly home commercial, as did my surgeon on the other end. But I did fly home first class commercial, and that was on me. But
yeah, I'm gonna say so there's a bunch of stuff, there's a bunch of layers there. And first of all, I just want to say I did have an emergency. The reason we're having this discussion this week is I had an experience with guests recently where this was the problem, and they ended up having $100,000 bill that they had to pay before.
oh wow.
Part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation this week. So that's why this all started. But having the room on your credit card is an important thing. You didn't need to do that, Kristen, right? You didn't need to have a credit card for any of this, right?
They just checked his passport, and that was it. They didn't ask us for any money whatsoever. Matter of fact, when he walked out, I was like, "Do we need to pay anywhere or do anything?" And he's like, "No, they just told me I was free to go."
Yeah, so you didn't have any procedures there, so you didn't have to pay, and they did your airline stuff for you. Kim, on the other hand, had to pay the hospital upfront plus, which would be normal actually. Had Kristen had her husband had to have had surgery, they would have made her pay upfront. But I also love your point, Kim. Ask for the private hospital, and Kristen, I have to wonder, was that a private hospital you went to?
It was not. The private hospitals were not open. I could not find. So I had asked for a private hospital. And so I ended up, we were at the Nuevo, I can't remember. It was a castle. It's out there by the harbor. And I went up in there, and I was talking to the guys that were running the tickets. And I used my broken Italian and asked for help. And I said, I need the very best hospital. That's what I said.
And normally they would take you to the private one. So that's an interesting distinction, first of all, that people watching may not know, that outside of the United States, there is a big distinction between public healthcare and private healthcare. And when I was in Palestine recently, or no, not recently, it was about 5 years ago, and I had a guest that fell. And that was the first thing the ambulance driver asked me. He said, "Do you want the private hospital or the public hospital?" And I said, "Where would you take your grandma?" Public or private hospital.
Private.
Take her to wherever you would take your grandma. And that's a great question to ask, because I don't know if the private or the public is better. And it's good to ask before you go. But so Kim, you had to pay them upfront. You got your surgery, you got home, but then you told me earlier that you actually got reimbursed the fees for your medical intervention by your health insurance, correct?
Yes. So the actual bill was only $2,600 total, and that was 3 days of hospitalization, surgery, daily chest X-rays, and a CAT scan. So that would have been about 50,000 in the U.S. I'm guessing. But my insurance, I was working, and they happily paid 23,000 or 2,300 of the 2,600. So I think Paul and I were out $300. It was really affordable, and we were at this beautiful private hospital. And in fact, my surgeon at home, when she went to take out my chest tube, she goes, "Oh, this is the fancy chest tube. We don't even put these in at our hospital." It was like the top of the line.
So this is, I have to say, the worst lesson I've learned as a tour guide, because I have taken people to a hospital in so many different countries. The worst lesson I've learned is that we are told in the US that we have the best healthcare in the world.
We don't.
We don't. And Thailand has the most beautiful hospital I've seen in my life in Bangkok. It looks like a Hilton. It's so beautiful. And the price we pay for healthcare with respect to what you pay in other countries is just like, it just melts your brain. So, and you got great care, I assume. Both of you got great care, I assume, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mine was amazing. Yeah. The nurses, the only thing that was interesting, I think I mentioned this, is that you don't get, the interesting thing in the US is we give narcotics very easily and freely, right? If you stub your toe and you walk into an ER, you're going to get Dilaudid or morphine. And in Peru, when you have six fractures over 5 ribs, you get Tylenol and another medication called Toradol. If any of you have had that, it's not non-narcotic. There's no narcotics really to speak of. I mean, very small.
Yeah, that's a big joke because my boyfriend he's from the Netherlands, and that's the joke in the Netherlands is like giving birth, here's a Tylenol.
Yeah,
Or
it's
like,
true.
here's a Tylenol. Like,
Yeah.
Tylenol's the answer to everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's true that the US, we do a lot more pain management than I think countries do. So that is a big differentiation.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, Kim, like what is like the lesson in all of this? If you could redo it, would you have travel insurance?
Of course I would. Yes. There were a lot of lessons I got, but travel insurance number one. And I did mention this, like having an excellent guide. Sarah, you were not my guide then, but you are. I would say was a big, big deal for me because my guide, his name was Washi, short for Washington. He was born and raised there. And he was the one who called a friend of his whose dad was like the minister of health for all of Peru. And his friend is also a private surgeon. And he said, you have to take her to this particular hospital. And I was so, my oxygen level was so low, called hypoxia, by the time we got down to sea level. I kept thinking, I'm just going to go to the hotel and go to sleep. And I kept saying, oh, I know, I just need to go to sleep. Tomorrow I'll go to the hospital. I'm going to bed now. And he kept saying to me, oh, no, you're not. You're going to a hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm just really tired. I think I'll go tomorrow. And so he was excellent at making sure I got where I needed to be. He made sure I got on that plane. He said to me, you have to get on this plane tonight. It was the last plane out. There was a thunderstorm. And he said, no, we have to get on that plane. So he really made sure I got to where I needed to be because my brain was no longer thinking.
And even though you're a nurse and you were able to analyze all those other things, when you're in shock, you actually don't really think very well.
Yeah.
So having an advocate and, had either of you like your husband had been by yourself or you had been by yourself, that's a whole other question for single travelers. So like having backup, particularly for single travelers, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Well,
and
go ahead.
And
Yeah. So I think that there's lots of great lessons to be learned from this. Kristen, I'm just curious, what do you do in the travel industry?
Oh, well, I've done lots of different things, but currently I work at Walt Disney World. But prior to that, I worked for British Airways and then Virgin Atlantic, and I did sales for both. So
wow. You then.
Yeah.
I love Disney World.
I know you do. Yeah. So my husband and I both work for Disney.
Oh, how cool.
Fun.
Yeah, so you guys are not non-veteran travelers. So this is great for people who are both. I know you guys, Kim, you guys have traveled a lot. You and Paula traveled a ton also. So we're not talking to people that don't travel. So I hope that this has been really instructive for all of you watching. And I think what I take away from this is, number one, get travel insurance that's appropriate for you, whatever that is. One thing you can do also is look at your health insurance plan. I think, Kim, your situation really reminds us that looking at the health insurance plan that you already have before you leave will tell you a lot about what you need. Because I think a lot of times people get a little bit overinsured because they don't know what they already have. A lot of times your credit cards will cover some of this stuff. Like you had mentioned, Kristen, your credit cards might have covered some of the stuff that the insurance.
Some of it. Yes.
Yeah, it would have done some of it. So I think the first step in this journey is, what do you already have coverage for? Find that out. And then from there, the next step is where's the gap and what do I need to do? And also the circumstance. I think if you're traveling by yourself, you guys were so lucky to have other people with you, but if you were by yourself, this would have probably turned, and Kim in particular, it would have turned out very different if you had not been with or you had not been with Paul, right?
Yeah.
So lots of good lessons to learn there. So I thank you guys so much for sharing your stories with us today. I hope those of you watching have been able to take something interesting away from this. Tomorrow, if you join us on Facebook, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, we're going to talk to not an insurance company, but an emergency services company that has a really interesting concept on how to help you with these things. And later on the weekend, we're going to talk about what travel insurance policies that we recommend. So thank you guys so much for all of your information. I really appreciate it. And these are just these wonderful women are just like you. They just are people who travel with me, who watch me. So I really appreciate when the community jumps in and helps us to learn a little bit more. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Sarah.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.